We take a lot of L's on this channel, okay? You know, we talk about a lot of L's for the trans people, for the trans community. It's not been a great year or so, okay? And we've been concerned that, you know, all these laws are passing, what's gonna happen? They're trying to limit our rights to healthcare and our access to public spaces. I myself live in Kansas, where it's currently illegal for me to use public bathrooms. Or rather, they have told me I'm supposed to use a certain bathroom, and if I do use that bathroom, then that doesn't mean that I'm going to be safe. There's still going to be scrutiny, and people could still call the cops on me. I might look one way, and my ID says something else. You know, people might think that I look like one thing, but then if I talk, they think that I sound like something else. And that confusion and dissonance is deadly to me, potentially. Like, that person could try to assault me, or that person could call the cops. That person is empowered now, where I live in Kansas, to call the cops on me for just existing in a public bathroom. So, you know, my rights are limited. Today we do have a win to talk about, because we have been concerned what's going to happen. You know, it's going to go through the courts, and we don't know what's going to happen if it goes through the courts and then gets all the way to the Supreme Court. We'll see, you know, how that's going to go. But we are starting to see some of those wins on the small scale, in the lower courts, in the circuit courts, as this inevitably works its way up through the appeals courts, through the process. It is, you know, going to be a question how it handles on the top end of it. But before we read these, I want to remind you that I have a Patreon. It is free for some content right now. There are paid things. This show is free and it's supported by those folks, but I am also posting some exclusive content for free. You can check it out. You can follow. If you want to join later after you get a sample of that content, that's totally fair. So on August 3rd, I follow some of this stuff on Aaron Reed's Substack. There was a Court of Appeals case which ruled that trans youth can use the bathroom related to their gender identity, which reaffirms an earlier ruling. So we are starting to see this process where it's working its way up into the appeals court system. You know, the circuit court means that some lower court has already seen this, affirmed the right of trans youth to use these correct bathrooms, and they are rejecting gender-neutral alternatives, which means that they're addressing the separate but equal argument, which is amazing. I'm so excited to see that. They have ruled that these trans youth can continue to use bathrooms in accordance with their good faith gender identity in Indiana, rejected an effort by school districts to overturn a lower court's preliminary injunction. This means trans youth in the state continue to have the right to access bathroom facilities, and policies barring them are blocked in states within that circuit's jurisdiction. So the 7th Circuit is in agreement now with the 4th Circuit and in opposition to the 11th Circuit on the bathroom access issue, which will only be resolved with the case being heard by the U.S. Supreme Court. So currently we have like a different set of standards in different parts of the country. Under the 11th Circuit, they're saying states here have a right to restrict the rights of trans people to access public spaces such as restrooms. But in both the 4th and the 7th Circuit, they've reaffirmed. And each one of those has multiple states under his jurisdiction. I would not mind more gender-neutral bathrooms, but not as a replacement for men's and women's bathrooms. Sure, I am most comfortable in a gender-neutral bathroom. I think that's totally fine. That, like, I want them to have that option. I really think that that should be an option anywhere there are bathrooms, frankly. Like, you should have all three if you're going to have gendered bathrooms. Either they should all be non-gendered, or the gendered ones should also have a neutral option. Yeah, but that does not mean, oh, this is the trans people bathroom. No. It's the bathroom for people who are comfortable in a gender-neutral space. It's not for you to put trans people in a box in a separate room where they can just be by themselves. No. That's not how we do things here. But because there is this question between the 7th and the 4th Circuit agreeing, but the 11th Circuit not agreeing on this issue, it literally is only going to be resolved if you appeal it all the way up to the Supreme Court. And potentially, of course, that's going to happen in the near future. So this question was on 3 trans boys. They were being required to use bathrooms corresponding to their sex at birth, or gender-neutral bathrooms that were far away from their classes, often making them late for class and revealing their trans status. Of course, because, like, if you're in school, where's the gender-neutral bathroom? In the nurse's office and the teacher's lounge are basically going to be the only places where you have a gender-neutral bathroom in a school. So if you have a school that's like 3 stories and you have class on the 3rd floor, you have to walk all the way downstairs to the front office, where the nurse's office is, in order to use a gender-neutral bathroom. It is an undue burden. And this is the fucking conversation that I had with Heem back in the day when we had this conversation. Like, trans people do not have equal rights in this way. Like, they are, like, the burden of receiving an education is increased if you have all these weird rules around where you're allowed to use the bathroom. My hopes are not high for the Supreme Court. I agree with you, Mama, that I don't really think that it's gonna go well. Just a little bit more details on this case. One boy traveled across the school to the health office bathroom only to find it locked on numerous occasions, leading at times to embarrassing accidents. Some of the boys would hold their bladders to the point that it posed a health threat and aggravated existing health problems. Yeah, trans people have a higher instance of urinary tract infections and bladder infections than the general population because of our tendency to hold our pee because we don't have access to safe bathrooms. Like, as a population, trans people, both men and women and non-binary people, we have health complications associated with holding our pee all day. So it's like, it's a literal health issue. And a lower court ruled that these policies were harmful to them and violated their civil rights under Title IX and the 14th Amendment's right to equal protection under the law. So the court in the Circuit of Appeals was asked to revisit this ruling. The 7th Circuit declined to revise its earlier ruling and, in fact, seemingly strengthened it, pointing out, for instance, that a recent Supreme Court decision makes it even more clear that discrimination against trans people is sex discrimination and renders policies such as these unconstitutional. This Supreme Court is so confusing. Does anybody else feel that way? Where it's like they are super good and based on one thing, and then they're like the opposite, and it's like the same fucking issue. Like, it's, you know, I literally don't have a consistent set of expectations for how trans rights are going to turn out because of how inconsistent this Supreme Court is being. And yes, this court has definitely cited the separate but equal thing. Like, you know, the idea that gender-neutral facilities amounts to a reasonable accommodation states that these facilities, though separate, were absolutely not equal. The gender-neutral alternatives were not true alternatives because of their distant location to the classrooms and the increased stigmatization that they caused plaintiffs. And offering remote schooling is denying a trans student the opportunity to socialize with and learn alongside the classmates, and that's not a true alternative either. Yeah, I'm glad that they addressed that in this case, that the idea of offering a student remote learning as an alternative. Now, if remote learning is like a standard, like if you have a couple hundred students who all have access to remote learning in your school district or in your county or whatever, if it's an actual real system where you have access to a decent amount of education, sure. But at this point, doing like remote schooling, they just say, hey, you figure it out, and you don't have any of the support that is required to actually get to like finish high school. This court has also tackled directly the idea that trans people in the bathroom will, quote, invade other students' privacy, and that allowing trans youth to use the bathroom could result in, quote, genital exposure. The court responded with skepticism, pointing out that there are stalls in bathrooms and that none of the students shared showers. The district is fighting a phantom, the court opinion stated. So frankly, like, slapped that shit down. Just slapped it down. Just no. We're not dealing with this. Just not dealing with this. And that's not the only bathroom win that we've had. We had another one later that same week. A Trump-appointed judge denies a, quote, right to trans-free bathrooms. Now listen, Lord, thank you, God, for these gifts that you are bestowing upon me, because here's what the deal is. I have been making this point for months now. For months now. These cisgender women, it's almost always fucking cis white women too, okay? They are constantly invoking this like specter of like trans bodies scaring them. You know, there was one where there was a YMCA where the girl was like accusing this, you know, man's body of being in there. There was this implication that the trans woman was like fully intact and swinging her penis around, but she had vaginoplasty. She had a vagina, you know? Like, she wasn't an intact male. It's just like the existence of a trans body in their space. Like the idea, like, oh, you can tell based on someone's facial features or something that they are trans, even if they don't have the genitals that you're allegedly so scared of. It fundamentally comes down to, Yeah, exactly. My sex-based right to not have to look at icky transgenders. Like, the idea that you have the right to a public space that's free of people you dislike being around you. I mean, this was fundamentally the question about, like, colored water fountains and things. Like, this idea that white women had, and, like, white people in general, I guess, but, like, white women in particular had this idea that they had the right to not be near black people. Like, that if a black man looked at you as a white woman, you could have him lynched because, oh, he was leering at me, he made me feel scared, he made me feel threatened. Like, and then we'll just fucking, like, end that dude. Like, white women have historically weaponized this idea that they deserve to be in spaces free of people they don't like. It's giving servants' quarters. It's giving servants' entrance. You know, when those really big houses that would have, like, a completely separate area and, like, doors in and out to the kitchen directly because people, like, did not want to see the help. They did not want to see the servants about their business. You know, you come in the house and you start doing your business and, like, cleaning shit and cooking our breakfast and everything, but don't you dare walk through our ornate front door. Like, oh God, you can't walk up the steps to the front door. We have to, like, prop up this idea of the perfect house that is just, you know, the maintenance is completely invisible. Exactly. Transphobia is just recycled homophobia, which in turn is just recycled racism. Exactly. Yeah, we reviewed this previously at the congressional meeting. Paula Scanlon, her entire grift is about this, like, idea that she had to share a locker room with Leah Thomas. And now she has a career going to Congress, grifting, probably gonna write a book about how, like, the idea of a trans woman in my space, it's exactly the same scaremongering around lesbians. We've talked about this multiple times on stream before. Like, lesbians in women's spaces, like, oh my God, what if someone looks at me? Like, oh, okay, why don't you go change in the bathroom stall if you're so fucking uncomfortable about it? Also, how many of you were trans teenagers and you changed in the bathroom stall? I wasn't even out yet. And I was in, like, freshman or sophomore year of high school or something, and I was in my PE class, and I would change in the stall. Even though I was, like, basically a girl amongst girls at that time in my life. Like, I literally didn't know I was trans and I changed in a stall. Hands up. Yeah, exactly. So let's continue reading. Yeah, like, I'm really glad that they did specifically address this. You, like, a right to trans-free bathrooms. You don't have the right to be around, to, like, just spaces free of people you don't like. Apparently, Ohio Muslim and Christian students have a right to, quote, trans-free bathrooms and curriculums. Like, that was the argument that was being made that got slapped down. So this guy was appointed by Trump. His name is Michael J. Newman. He dismissed a lawsuit by Muslim and Christian groups in Ohio, which were seeking to prevent trans teachers and students from using restrooms corresponding with their gender identity. Newman's ruling also denied the plaintiff's request to remove instructional materials promoting LGBTQ+ inclusivity. They really did try to get even the, like, literature acknowledging in a neutral way the existence of queer people. They were like, yeah, it's actually against the rights of us as, like, Christians and Muslims for this stuff to even be in the schools, you know? Like, it's not okay. It's against our rights to even acknowledge the existence, not even being in the same space as them, but to merely know that they exist. It's our right to protect our children from the knowledge that people are different from them. Wow. So, anyway, a lawsuit was filed by Muslim and Christian plaintiffs against the school district in Dayton, Ohio. The suit claimed the district consulted with attorneys who advised that under state and federal civil rights laws, a trans student must be permitted to use the restroom of the gender identity. The school acted based on this interpretation. Yes, this is how it's been interpreted, basically. The plaintiffs falsely argued that Title IX actually prohibits trans students from using these restrooms. They also contended that permitting trans students in restrooms of their gender identity and including queer educational materials infringes on their religious liberty to, quote, have trans-free bathrooms. Transgender-free bathrooms, a phrase taken directly from the ruling. The judge disagreed and dismissed the lawsuit on both merits and standing. From the judge's analysis, we hear plaintiffs characterize the school district's actions as a preference favoring trans students by permitting them to use the bathroom that aligns with their gender identity, while simultaneously harming plaintiffs by rejecting their attempt to prevent this girl from using the girl's bathroom, causing them anxiety and distress because the school district is not honoring their, quote, self-declared core identity. No, they didn't. No, they didn't. There's no... Did you seriously? There's no way. Did you really, like, make the self-declared core identity, like, my religion, my self-declared identity as a religious person is what I'm trying to have protected here? What the Okay. Anyway, the parent plaintiffs made the same allegations, contending that parents of trans students receive disproportionate favoritism because their children's wishes are respected, while the parent plaintiff's children's religious beliefs requiring transgender-free bathrooms are not honored. Oh my God, no. No. They really tried to say, like, our religious identity. Like, like, the levels of projection here. Like, how are you sitting here trying to remove the rights of trans people because of your religious beliefs? Like, you're trying to limit other people's rights to public access because of your religious beliefs, and you're accusing them of receiving disproportionate favoritism because their children's wishes are being respected. Fucking amazing. Like, I declare the right to bigot-free bathrooms. I should not have to share the air with you. I declare the right to bigot-free oxygen. Yeah, it says, although parents have the right to make decisions about where to send their children to school, they do not have a constitutional right to revoke a school's policy on student bathroom usage. Count 4 imposes an equal protection challenge without disparate treatment, so the court cannot afford the relief that plaintiffs seek. The lawsuit went further. Plaintiffs also sought a judgment to remove the queer materials, arguing that this inclusive curriculum violates their religious beliefs and their liberties. Let's see. These legal challenges are increasingly common but rarely successful. In this case in Ohio, the judge dismissed the plaintiff's claim, citing a Ninth Circuit opinion which states that accommodating the various, quote, personal, moral, or religious concerns of every parent would be, quote, impossible for public schools. The opinion noted that different parents might often, as in this case, desire conflicting outcomes. So basically, this decision is saying, even though you have a religious right to, like, your beliefs about trans people, your personal religious beliefs do not afford you the power and sway to limit other people's civil rights. You know, if we have the civil rights in place where, like, someone is allowed to use the bathroom or, like, someone is allowed to get married or whatever, like, you don't have to be trans and use the bathroom if you don't like it. You don't have to get gay married if you don't like it, but you don't have the right to prevent other people from accessing spaces and being treated equally under the law, which is the 14th Amendment argument. So again, this is a Trump-appointed judge, and we've seen this happen numerous times now where Trump-appointed judges rule on the side of rights and the Constitution. You know, like, it's frankly a stretch when these courts rule against trans people. They have to really, like, twist the Constitution. They have to really twist the law in order to make it, like, so that trans people don't have rights. The one argument that I think is going to lose us the Supreme Court is, like, enshrined in our nation's history kind of thing. Like, this argument that the right to transition is not included in our Constitution because it wasn't part of what the founders originally thought of when they wrote it. You know, people weren't doing this allegedly when we were establishing this country. So, you know, that means, you know, we can say it's illegal because it's not part of our nation's tradition and history. So that's what I'm scared of happening. But these judges who aren't biased in that way, these judges who are following the merits of the case, who are actually reading the law, who are actually looking into it, repeatedly we are seeing that there is no grounds for denying trans people access to these spaces because it is sex discrimination. Yeah, there's no law saying we can't exclude you specifically, except that the Ninth Amendment kind of does say that. Like, I do get frustrated that the Ninth Amendment is kind of ignored in these conversations a lot. Hold on. Let me find it for you. The Ninth Amendment, for those of you who are not familiar, says The enumeration in the Constitution of certain rights shall not be construed to deny or disparage others retained by the people. So this is saying we have written the Constitution. We have written certain rights into the Constitution, like you have the right to privacy or you have the right to equal protection under the law, etc. The Ninth Amendment says just because we didn't explicitly give you the right to do something in here doesn't mean that you don't have the right to do that. Like, the fact that we didn't say you're explicitly allowed to trans your gender, it should not be construed to mean you don't have the right to do that. Yeah, originalism is just a legal theory to justify bigoted garbage, and when questioned, you go, well, shucks, the Constitution says so, not my fault. It's because it's all based on interpretations. You can construe the Constitution as saying one thing, and, like, whether that was their original intentions or not, you know, that may be the amendment that could reverse most of the newest SCOTUS rulings, including the overturn of Roe v. Wade. Well, yeah, that was the thing that was so frustrating about Roe v. Wade, is that they decided on the merits that the idea that your health care is private was an interpretation originally. Birth control was the very first time the 14th Amendment was evoked to mean that people's healthcare, like, they have a right to make their healthcare decisions. It's private. Like, the government can't limit it unreasonably. But yeah, like, the Ninth Amendment definitely should be invoked on this. Just because it is not written into the Constitution that you have a right to get an abortion doesn't mean that you don't have a right to get an abortion, right? It's frankly, like, one of the most loosey-goosey amendments. You could frankly use it for a lot of things, I think. I'm curious how many Supreme Court cases have evoked the Ninth Amendment. That's actually a question that I have. I don't know that I'm going to look into it right now, but I could certainly look into it later. I might look into it later. Anyway, we had some wins, and we're not sure how it's going to go on the Supreme Court level, but we did have some wins, so let's just, like, acknowledge and celebrate that, okay? And in the midst of us acknowledging and celebrating that, you should hit the like on the video, and you should share the video. And then also, I just want to remind you again, before we reach the end of the segment, that Patreon has a free tier now. So if you want, you can come check out the free stuff. And if you want, give a little dono. Get your name in the credits. Or get access to the private vlogs or something. You know, we're going to have more and more content over there, both free and paid. Go check it out. No pressure. And that's it. Thank you to my supporters, especially Tiago Nascimento, Mersh Rolvog, Michelle Frateroli, Danielle McDonald, Amanda B., Spooky Heather Sylvia, Athiet, Kevin Young, Sarah A., Michelle Winter, Past Null Infinity, Robin Olson, Jamie Jam, Desi Quiche, Suzanne Maynard, Nova, Elizabeth Bartell, Mr. Atheist, Sojo, and DZXN.